Welcome to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us today. We share real stories and give you tips, tricks, and strategies to fit kindness into your life. Enjoy and know that you are a bright light in this world. Welcome back to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver. I am so grateful that you're here today and you're tuned in and listening. I got to share on the last episode at the end, and I want to make sure I highlight it again at the beginning of this episode. Be the Light, the book that I've written, is out. The link is in the show notes. If you are not had the opportunity to read that, I encourage you to do so. It's a great summer read or just a year-round read. It's weird even talking about it, if I'm being honest with you and vulnerable in this space with all the listeners. It's weird saying I wrote a book, but I want to make sure that it is reaching the people that it's intended to, because the idea was to help as many people as I could along the way. So for those of you that have purchased a copy and sent affirming and kind words, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And I want to start today not just talking about the book that I wrote, but I want to talk to you about a moment that stayed with me longer than I really expected that it would. You know, I've probably talked about on the podcast in several episodes that I live in Oklahoma City and I live near a lake in the city. And from my house, we don't live on the lake, but you can see the lake from a distance from our house. And the other day I was out walking our dog, King. He's a black golden doodle, around the lake. And it was windy. It was really, really windy. If you're familiar with Oklahoma weather, it's been wild right now. Lots of winds. We've had storms and tornadoes and all the things. And so I share that with you because you could see the waves of the lake moving strongly in one direction. The water was super active, restless, and it was moving constantly. The waves were crashing. And at one point I looked down and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm at the ocean. And then later when I was coming home, I had turned a loop back after about a mile and a half, and something changed. I noticed something immediately. The wind had shifted direction, and now the waves were moving in a different direction too. And I think I'd remind myself that I was looking at the exact same lake. It was just a different movement. I came home and I went about my day, and I kept thinking about the ways in which the waves crashed and landed those two different directions on that same day. The next day I'd get up and I would walk the same path again, but I noticed something different. This time there was no movement at all. The water was incredibly calm, not because the lake had changed, but because the wind had. And standing there when I was looking at that water that was still, that just the day before was moving. Well, really it was moving in two directions the day before and crashing in different ways. As I stood there, I thought, this is life. Sometimes life feels really calm. It feels predictable. It feels steady. It feels grounded. Comfortable even for some of us to use that word. And sometimes everything shifts. Emotions move, our circumstances change, our stress rises, our relationships change, plans change, and suddenly everything feels unsettled, like waves moving in directions you didn't expect. And I think about two different experiences in my life where this has been evident. One was several years ago and one more recent. I remember when I was hired as an executive team member in 2022 at a school district in the Oklahoma City metro area. And the superintendent shared their vision of how we were going to move the district forward. And I remember at the end of the phone call, I was standing outside when we were talking, and I said on my porch, wow, I can see us on a 60-minute special saying, what did they do to turn the tide and make the change? And I was all motivated. I was really inspired, and I was ready to move forward. And every day I kept that motivation until we got to the beginning of 2023. And in 2023, I realized that we were off course. We had changed vision. We had lost some of the momentum and some of the goals and objectives we had outlined, that we were more politically aligned with what people were worried about doing and playing favorites and doing friends and all these things that were not applicable to the visions and goals that we had set forth. And sometimes I think that's what happens in life, right? Just like those waves change direction, the circumstances in that environment change direction. Now, it wasn't as quick as different directions in the same day or being still the next day. It took a matter of time and a matter of days to realize being off course and being that I was no longer aligned to the vision that they were trying to achieve, which is fine, right? I think everything is a season of life and sometimes for a lifetime. But I also think about most recently. I've shared openly that my partner is running for office here in Oklahoma, and one of the team members recently decided to step away with 8 days notice and a 24-hour turnaround timeline to remove themselves from the campaign. And I'll share some of the language they were using in the debrief conversation. Some of the language that was being used in correspondence was very fear-mongering, right? If these things aren't complied with by this time, this could happen. And as always, we want to be compliant with tax and ethics commissions and law and all those things, and we always are. But in that moment where they were disparaging all this information and moving away from the campaign and using different tone and rhetoric that we weren't used to, it made me think again about that wave. In that moment on those days where I saw the waves change position and change location and move all based on the wind, in the two examples I shared, they weren't immediate, right? They weren't immediate like the wind. But over time, they shifted. Over time, energy changed, relationship changed, stress has changed, plans changed. And at the same time, we can use that to say all of those things were negative and this was this or this was that. If you go back and listen to an episode before, we know that everything's happening for a reason. Everything's happening for us. It's our responsibility to see it that way. So I challenge you. I want you to think about the last season of your life. Was that season peaceful? Maybe it was chaotic. Maybe it was incredibly uncertain or emotionally heavy. But how quickly did it change? For my experiences, they weren't quick. Some took months, others took a year or so. And that's because life is fluid. Each reason people struggle emotionally is because they expect permanence from something that's designed to move. The brain creates predictability and craves predictability. As much as we say we don't want structure, we crave it for safety, for certainty, for control. So when life shifts or the waves start rocking in our life, unexpectedly, emotionally, or relationally, the nervous system is innately wired to respond and to react. So initially, stress increases because the brain interprets uncertainty as potential danger. And that's why it feels so exhausting. It feels so taxing. It feels like you are maxed out, tapped out, and stressed out. And it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're not capable. It's because your brain is trying to regain stability in real time. The nervous system does not fear movement. The nervous system fears unpredictability. I'll share this activity with you that I do in workshops often. I ask individuals to look around the room and identify someone they don't know. Just identify them, right? Just look and identify someone that you're not familiar with. And then I say, if I were to ask you to get up and go over to talk to them, right? And immediately, as I'm saying this out loud in this open space with the participants in the room, the energy changes. I can see the deer in the headlight looks. I can see the people clutching their chest. I can see the redness on their necks and their faces, right? I see all of this energy change in real time because if I were to ask them to get up and go talk to somebody else, our brain, most likely, that reaction is our brain resisting vulnerability. That reaction they're having is our brains resisting vulnerability in real time because we are not wired to be vulnerable. But when we are, we foster belonging, openness, and trust, and our brain restricts it and reacts to it, right? But we can choose to overcome it, and there are ways to do those things. So I share that example with you because the nervous system does not fear movement. It does not fear doing things. It fears unpredictability. In that moment, I'm asking you to go talk to somebody else. It's unpredictable. You don't know who they are. You don't know how they're going to respond. And just like the waves, it's unpredictable based on the wind. But yet, even in those circumstances, life keeps moving anyway. The wind may change, the waves may change, the season may change, and sometimes we suffer because we keep trying to force stillness in a world designed for all kinds of movement. And I know as humans, we're hardwired for control. We want to control other people, their thoughts, their actions, their responses. And I'm guilty of that as well. There's been many of times in the experiences that I shared vulnerably at the beginning of this episode that I wanted to say something and do something. But what I had to realize is I can't control that. And people try to control timing. They try to control relationships. They try to control success. They try to control other people's reactions. Heck, you might be thinking, that's me, right? But let me tell you that right now. You're doing it, and I do it too, because certainty feels safer. But life never works that way. Sometimes the wind shifts unexpectedly, and no amount of control changes that. We cannot control anyone but ourselves. And not only do we fight control, we also fight emotions. Think about if you put your finger on a hot stove. That's an indicator that that stove is hot, and it sends a signal to your body, hot, right? Emotions are the exact same way. But for so many of us, we were taught that emotions are bad, but they're not. Emotions are signposts. They're communicators. They're telling us something. But I'm sure if you're anything like me, we've heard before, you want something to cry about? I'll give you a reason to cry. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out of this world, right? These things that didn't really make navigating emotions something comfortable or accessible. And so now people fight emotions trying not to feel sad, trying not to feel anxious, not trying to feel uncertain. But emotions, just like those waves, they move the same way. The more you fight them, the more exhausted you become. And the other thing that we do is we hold on to old seasons a lot. Sometimes people suffer, and you might be one of them, me too, that keep expecting old versions of life to remain. Old relationships, old friendships, old cycles, old identities, old workplaces, old seasons. But growth often requires movement, and movement requires letting things shift and to change. I often say, some things are for a lifetime and some are for a season. And when those things shift and change, it's not for us to get upset and frustrated, angry and mad, resentful, frustrated, right? It's for us to reflect and identify that, right? Just like the waves, it's a movement, it's a change, it's a shift. So let's pause here for just a second, and I want to ask you something. If you were to reflect on your own life, what are you trying to control right now? What season of your life are you resisting? Who are you trying to control right now? And what would happen if you stopped fighting the movement and just adjusted? This is where kindness becomes powerful, friend. Not because kindness is going to get out there and stop the wind, but because kindness changes how you move through the wind. Kindness says this season will not last forever. You do not have to panic before things get shifted. And movement is not failure. Those things are ways to be kind to your mind. Kindness helps us stop treating temporary seasons like permanent identities. Because sometimes life is calm. Absolutely. And it's amazing. And also, sometimes life is chaotic. And it's equally amazing when we see that. And I'll be clear with you. Sometimes life is uncertain. But all of it is life. And we have to remember that sometimes the direction changes because of outside forces, but all of this is life. So I want to leave you with a simple framework. The next time life feels emotionally stormy, remember the lake. The movement is not permanent, my friend. Waves change, and so does life. And the direction can shift quickly. Just because today feels heavy doesn't mean that tomorrow will. And calm seasons, they return. Not every season is chaos. And you do not, sweet friend, have to control the wind. You just have to learn how to move through it. I'll take you back to 2022 when I had onboarded and I was so excited for the mission that was there and the excitement that was happening and all the things that had transformed. And I was really excited. I thought we were really going to end up on a 60-minute special. And I fast forward to the end of my time there in 2023, and I don't even recognize myself. I think back to the amount of alcohol I was consuming and the other vices that I was using in a time in which it was really dark. I think about a friend who no longer was a friend and no one that I assumed to recognize. I think back to the goals that we had set forth and the chaos that had transpired with friends being fired and individuals being let go because of misaligned priorities. And I think about the end of the day students losing. I think about all of this season that was emotional overwhelm and stress. And I think about a time in which I doubled down to work harder, but what I realized was some place that I had loved and wanted to be motivated and inspired to achieve had stopped loving and seeing me months, almost a year before I realized it. And in that season, I was so hurt, so lost almost, if you will. And I think it took me a long time. 2 years, if I'm being honest to you, friend, as you listen to this episode. 2 years to overcome some of the internal dialogue was there and to realize that I can't control everything in that regard. And what I realized was that stressful season, that emotional overwhelm, that chaos that I was navigating, the resentment, the frustration, the anger, the worry, the doubt, the fear, all of it led to an eventual calm. And to be honest, it was the culmination of Orange Sparrow. It was the culmination of Be the Light. It's the science of kindness. All of these things happened in that moment that I didn't necessarily see because I was so focused on the direction of the waves and the direction the wind was blowing that I was trying to control it. But we can't always control things. Just like that time I was at the lake. The lake looked different every single time I walked by it. 2 times in that one day and completely still the second day. And it's not because the lake ever failed, and it's not because something was wrong. It's because the conditions changed. And maybe that's true for us too. I think back to those experiences that I'm vulnerably sharing in this episode around my work and the executive leadership. And that's exactly it, how I frame it. The conditions had changed. Really, the alignment had changed. The conversations had changed and the lack of leadership had changed. And I realized that I had an opportunity that had manifested itself from a previous experience similar to that of 2019. And this time I got to choose differently. I got to change. Just like the wind changed the directions of the waves, I got to change and choose something differently for me. And I think that's the reminder for all of us. Maybe the emotional waves you're feeling right now are not proof that you're broken. Maybe they're proof that you're human and that life moves and that seasons shift and that winds change and that kindness is what helps us move through all of this without ever losing ourselves. You don't have to control the wind. You don't have to force stillness. You just have to remember this, friend. Waves change direction all the time, and so can you. And as I always say, please remember, if you can't find the light, be the light. And sometimes the light you're looking for is the one that you carry on the inside. Please make sure you're following along, subscribe to the channel, and listen. If this episode resonated with you and you thought of someone as you listened to it, feel free to share with them. This is how we spread our message of kindness to make kindness go viral. Make sure you're following along at orangesparrow.org, thescienceofkindness.com, or drchrisculver.com. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, the new book is out. Make sure you get your copy today. And until next time, I love you, friend, and I'll see you soon on the next episode of The Science of Kindness.
The Science of Kindness podcast is hosted by Dr. Chris Culver. Our executive producer is Jake Doberens. This podcast was created in conjunction with Theophany Media.